Ocampo goes down for the second time, the first time since he was stopped by Errol Spence in the opening round. And it looks like Zoo's looking to close the show. Mamma mia, lights, camera, knockout!
Nice left hand from Jesus, yeah. Just allowing his opponent to close that gap down to that sort of... Oh, there you go!
Due to this non-stop onslaught from Rocha. Oh my goodness! What a shot! Alexis Rocha!
Dear friends, this eventful year is coming to its end, and it's about time to recap the highlights. In today's video, I will show you the best 25 knockouts of 2023. Please don't forget about the likes, comments with 4 words, and subscribe to the channel. Here we go. Number 25. Carlos Ocampo versus Lamont Capers. Admittedly, the cruiserweight division is dead and it won't be resuscitated in the near future. Unfortunately, throughout the decades, the best representatives of this weight class migrated to the Royal Division, which impoverished the roster. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any spectacular knockouts and those who can deliver them to the fans. One of such people is a young Cuban, Carlos Ocampo, with a record of 11-1, who went up against some Lamont Capers on a streak of 3 losses. The only reason Capers happened to be in the ring is to get a paycheck. That's why he did nothing but hiding behind the block and throwing jabs, while the Cuban decided to put his creativity on full display. Attacks to the body, leaping shots, distance management. Carlos showed all of that in just 1.5 rounds. For this whole time, Carlos was trying to avoid unnecessary shots, but suddenly decided to showboat and threw a jab on the retreat with his hands low.
Acting, you have to be...
Boom! Brilliant punishment with the left hand from Ocampo. Number 24. We haven't heard about title scraps in the featherweight division for quite a while. Does this weight class even exist? It sure does, and a recent championship bout between Leigh Woods and Mauricio Lara is a testament to that. In February of this year, the WBA title holder, a 35-year-old Leigh Woods named Lethal, was defending his belt for the second time, and the contender happened to be a fired-up Mexican bronco, Mauricio Lara. Leigh began to fight so confidently that one thought like, yeah, experience is better than youth. No matter how hard an explosive Mexican bull tried to cannon at the champion, he quickly cut angles and thrusted his big straight shots. Mauricio was cooling down after every missed punch, but the guy did not lose hope and kept on fighting. And it paid off. By the 7th round, the champion lost his focus and the prospect stunned him with a wild hook. Wood was completely disoriented and barely got back to his feet, so his corner did not hesitate to throw in the towel, because otherwise the Mexican Devil could have simply murdered him. Number 23. Trevor Palmer versus Lester Espino. There is a certain category of fights that aren't interesting even to the most loyal boxing fans, while a casual viewer wouldn't watch them at gunpoint. But even among such gems, one could find something worthy. For example, a recent clash between Trevor Palmer and Lester Espino. The Brit, with a record of 2-1 against a veteran pushing 30 from Nicaragua with a record of 7-4, sounds a bit trashy, but look at the outcome. Better believe nobody will stay indifferent. In terms of appearance, Palmer looked like a dried out Joshua. However, I can't say the same thing about his boxing skills. Instead of forcing his fight, the Brit wanted to run around the ring and poke with his jab. And the funniest thing is that Trevor got tired even from such a slow pace, losing the initiative. Lester figured that it's time to go and loaded with a shot, sending the guy down. When he got up, Palmer ate merely a poke and fell down like a tree, and being on the ground, he failed his first attempt to get back up.
That's it. In comes...
Number 22. Giovanni Estella vs Gerardo Caraballo. Knockouts in the big fights between elite boxers deliver way more emotions than others, but unfortunately, they don't happen too often. So let's appreciate not only them, but also flashy performances from young and promising guys. Undoubtedly, such include a young Giovanni from Orlando with a record of 12-0 with 3 knockouts. In the end of September, he was given another victim named Gerardo Caraballo. The opponent tried to pressure Giovanni, but this plan immediately went south. A fast and very talented American perfectly controlled the distance and easily countered his vis-a-vis with heavy shots from both hands. The more active Caraballo was in his attacks, the more punches he ate, and in the middle of the round, he began to dance around missing too many shots. Giovanni instantly initiated a counterattack, and in the midst of a combination of lightning-fast strikes, he unloaded a monstrous uppercut. Even though the shot landed at point blank, the guy got up, but the referee ultimately stopped the fight, and it was the right call. Number 21. Gary Antoine Russell vs Kent Cruz. If I told you that I know a guy with a record of 17-0 and 17 knockouts, would you be surprised? I doubt it, but here's one detail: this hero competed in the super lightweight division. Now you have the gist of who Gary Antoine Russell is, and you might be a bit interested. You would like to see this prodigy in action, right? Then it's about time to look at his most recent performance against the same undefeated Kent Cruz and decide whether to follow this guy or not. Russell immediately showed his opponent his main trump card, a fantastic hand speed. Seeing how quickly the guy threw his hammers, Kent began to cover his head but exposed the body, which Gary momentarily capitalized on.
And there's a left uppercut. Cruz was looking at the referee's attention, was distracted, and he goes down.
As he converged with Cruz, he turned on his grinder and landed a scary uppercut to the midsection. Kent sat down on the canvas and recovered, but it didn't get any better when he got up.
The weird thing is, I was just about to say it was a kind of a more tactical start.
The prospect continued his pressure and soon found Cruz's liver once again. I can't believe what I'm saying right now, but considering how bad it looked, the guy would have preferred the shot to the nuts if he had such an option. Number 20. Liam Smith vs Chris Eubank Jr. Let's talk about the boxers of the middleweight division, Chris Eubank and Liam Smith. The first one is famous for successfully continuing the work of his father, the great champion of the beginning and the middle of the 90s, while the second one is remembered by the fans for his tragic story and the fight against Saul Alvarez, after which he took on the role of the gatekeeper. In the very beginning of 2023, the guys were put against each other, or to be exact, Smith was fed to a rising Eubank as a sacrificial lamb. And what was the outcome? The feeling out process lasted for about 2 minutes, after which Chris turned up and won the round thanks to a couple of punches. Eubank felt like a boss and vividly showed that with his hands low. The guy wanted to show the whole world that he is a boxer of a different caliber, but played too much.
Too much of an opportunity to do his own work. This time though, let's go with the left hand. Eubank. She's a left hand, down he goes.
During the series of his quick and precise attacks, Chris didn't notice that Liam pressed him to the corner. Taking advantage of the situation, Smith exploded with a wild combination and sat behind every shot. Just a couple of punches were enough to knock Eubank down. After getting back to his feet, the Brit was still wobbly but decided to continue, for which he was punished with another ferocious attack. Smith wins via TKO. Number 19. Javante Davis vs Ryan Garcia. A lot of things were said about this fight, but not putting this fight among the best finishes of 2023 would be a crime. The fight day that Ryan waited for 5 years finally came, and the Flash faced his bitter rival, Javante Davis. At that moment, both guys managed to become the main stars of the lightweight division, and even though a bunch of belts was not on the line, this rivalry was recognized as the most important one in the whole weight class. Javante did his job so beautifully that he deserves an applause. The puncher from Baltimore did not attack first and gave Garcia the initiative, while the latter got too excited and dropped already in the second round of the fight. Number 18. Dan Hill versus Dylan Biggs. Let's complement our evening of American, Mexican and British boxers with an Australian derby in the super welterweight division. You most likely don't know the names of the guys I'm about to say, but try to remember them, as these heroes put a lot of effort into giving us a spectacular performance. So the fight between an undefeated Dylan Biggs and the same unbeaten Dan Hill. Get ready, go! It feels like the Australian school of boxing doesn't teach defense. I simply don't know how to explain why these guys eat so many punches. Look at any moment of this intense clash and you would 100% see how one smashes the other, or a mutual brawl. At first, Biggs was winning in all of this fussing, but Hill managed to take the initiative and bullied him near the ropes for a couple of rounds. The bloody scrap lasted for 7 rounds, and in the 8th, Dylan suddenly threw with such power that his vis-a-vis turned into a ragdoll and then shut down on the ground. This bout definitely takes the award for the most terrifying finish. Number 17. Tim Tszyu versus Carlos Ocampo. Konstantin Tszyu, a former undisputed super welterweight champion, recognized as one of the best boxers in history of his weight class. The era of such a talented master ended in 2011 with a loss to Ricky Hatton. But now, the Sons of Thunder from Down Under arrived on the scene, and the most successful out of them is Tim Tszyu. Recently, the guy conquered the WBO title, but only after his 23rd career victory over Carlos Ocampo. That's the fight we're interested in. Many life examples prove that talent is not a genetic thing, but Tim is a bright exception. As soon as the bell rang, Tim pushed the pace and confused his opponent with his speed and chaotic movement. While Carlos tried to figure out what was going on, the young Australian peppered him with dozens of different shots and then threw a crushing right straight.
My goodness, what a start! By Tszyu, down goes!
Ocampo immediately went down and got up with the complete devastation written on his face. It was clear that he couldn't last too long against this monster, but Tim still managed to impress us and knock the Mexican out with a 1-2.
Ocampo goes down for the second time, the first time since he was stopped by Errol Spence in the opening round. And it looks like Tzyyu's looking to close the show. Mamma mia, lights, camera, knockout!
A bit messy, but beautiful finish. Number 16. Jack Kilganon versus Dan Catlin. The British fans love fighting. The stern folks from Foggy Albion can't imagine their lives without different kinds of martial arts, while boxing is literally the product of British consciousness. That's why it's relevant there for more than 100 years. Such a strong love for this sport makes people want to watch all sorts of fights, including the rivalry of unknown guys like Jack Kilganon and Dan Catlin. Dan turned the second gear, but then his gearbox broke down. No matter what his opponent was doing, Catlin was going after him with punches or simply controlled Jack in the clinch. Overall, this was a decent tactic, and Dan was winning the fight, so we could peacefully watch this unassuming spectacle for the entire given time. But luckily, things turned out differently.
Third, but bloody did. Oh, lovely overhand right by Catlin.
During one of the attacks, Catlin put a lot of power in his straight punch. Jack blocked it with his face and immediately collapsed. He was out so bad that the guy didn't even feel how he fell through the ropes and happened to be outside of the ring. Number 15. Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford. Errol Spence against Terrence Crawford, the main and perhaps the best fight that could have been made in the welterweight division in the last 5 years. The winning streaks of two champions overshadowed other guys in the weight class a long time ago, and the only obstacle for that fight to happen was the dispute between the promoters. Finally, in 2022, Terrence left Top Rank, and a few months later, the fans got what they have been waiting on for years. Vaunted pace and cardio of Spence crushed against the versatile talent of Terrence Crawford, but was simply shutting down all of his opponent's attacks right off the bat and did not let Errol work on the needed distance, while also finding the ways to get him out of position and counter with a big shot.
Jab to the head and the body, and there's a combination that drops Errol Spence.
That's how Spence got knocked down in the second round, after which he lost confidence and couldn't come up with anything better than trying to outplay a masterful opponent. Dominance of Terrence lasted for more than 8 rounds. The 7th one was especially hard, where unbreakable Spence went down twice.
Oh, the right hook!
In the 9th round, crushed Errol wasn't a threat anymore and was ultimately finished by the champions.
On inline skates, and the referee is entering. Bud Crawford.
Not the most spectacular, but important knockout for the entire sport. Number 14, Diego Pacheco versus Jack Cullen. Among other prospects in the super middleweight division, the Mexican monster David Benavidez stands out the most, and it seems like there are almost no other worthy young boxers in the weight class, but Diego Pacheco completely disagrees with that. By the beginning of this year, a 22-year-old American was on a streak of 17 victories with 14 knockouts, and for such remarkable achievements, he was given a fight for the vacant WBO international title against Jack Cullen. Long and slim hands of Pacheco were more accurate than any sniper rifle and occasionally made Jack wobble from missed strikes. Sharp jabs, straight punches, and shots to the body, all of that merged into an infinite hurricane of strikes that Cullen had to withstand. By the 4th round, Pacheco already worked his opponent up and went for the finish.
And it is the big right hand over the top this time. Missed with
At first, the prospect scored the knockdown with a shot to the liver, and then he threw a double jab followed by his signature straight.
Cullen in desperate trouble. Pacheco now follows through, and the referee dives over to rescue Cullen.
Jack got shut down before even hitting the canvas. Number 13, Nikita Zoo versus Benjamin Bomber. And here's the man whose last name got mentioned on the list of the best knockouts of the year twice. We already talked about the incredible talents of an older son of the great Konstantin Zoo. Now it's time to let the younger one shine. Nikita had a rich amateur career, but never thought of having a future in professional boxing, but life decided everything for himself and the guy got into the ring. It's great for us, as losing such a talent would be a waste. To get proof of that, just look at what Zoo Jr. did in the fight against Ben Bomber. The difference in levels could be felt already during the announcement, and everything became clear with the bell. Nikita was easily catching his opponent at every mistake and landing his looping, but at the same time very precise punches. The first good shots landed after a minute into the fight, but the main show was ahead. At the end of the round, Zoo perfectly caught his opponent with an uppercut, after which he began to throw punches so quickly that the opponent couldn't go down even if he wanted to. Luckily, the referee stepped in, grabbed Ben's hand, and went down together with him. The most comical moment of today. Number 12. David Morel versus Yamaguchi Falco. Today we saw classic battles of elite boxers and strange fights that look like a scrap at the bar counter, but there is one thing we haven't seen in all of this variety yet: the rivalry of two debutants. I know, you might say that there is nothing to look at in such a fight, as the overall level of boxers is a bit higher than the city sewer, and in most cases I would agree with that, but not in this one. Stephen Motley and Quintarius is that exact 1 in a million exception. At first, Stephen was focusing his attention on the opponent's body and every second shot was thrown at this exact spot, but then he suddenly switched direction and began to target the head. Coco did not attack for this whole time and he kept his hands high, perhaps being too afraid to get hit due to inexperience. Unfortunately, he ultimately had to get hit, and what a shot it was! A short straight hand momentarily shut down Coco's entire system and made his body go down in an arch trajectory. If that's not art, I don't know what is. Number 10. Brian Mendoza ends on the fight between two prospects, but when two undefeated huge guys get into the ring, you have to admit it, it's genuinely interesting. That's exactly the fight that recently happened between heavyweights David Adelay from Britain and Dmytro from Ukraine. The overall record of these guys at the time of the fight was 20-0 with 14 knockouts. The European Championship was on the line. How can this fight be boring? Adelay immediately began to attack and bomb his huge opponent, but that did not deliver results. Soon Bezos went forward himself, but the Brit was ready and perfectly countered him with a jab. A hard shot knocked the Ukrainian down, and he was in recovery mode till the end of the round. In the second, the guys switched roles and Dmytro went for an aggressive attack. Not willing to get hit by any more powerful shots, Bezos began to work at a short range, and he did rather well until this happened. In the heat of the battle, David found a perfect moment and thrusted his powerful left hook. The punch echoed through the arena, letting everybody know that it's a knockout. Number 8. Jaron Ennis versus Roman Villa. Since beating Spence, Crawford didn't have time to pick a new fight, but he was talking about many potential opponents. That list included Canelo and both Charlo brothers, but there was one name he didn't mention. The loss taught the British Mr. Olympia cautiousness that sometimes turns into hesitation. Because of that, AJ lost both fights to Alexander Usyk, though with his size he could have put the Ukrainian through a meat grinder. Joshua became more active and began to attack to different levels. Not only did such combinations bother Robert, but they also confused him, all while setting up the ground for a knockout. In the 7th round, Anthony gained confidence and threw a jab to the midsection and then switched to the head.
is not a mug.
Right straight from a huge heavyweight, and not the most durable head equals a stiff knockout. Number 6. Ellis Zorro versus Hosea Burton. Here we have cruiserweights again, but this time a much higher level, so don't even think of skipping. Okay, the rivalry between an undefeated Brit Ellis Zorro with a record of 15-0 and a tough but quite prospectless Hosea Burton, who at that time was 34. Experience against youth, or just the Brit versus the Brit? You decide. Zorro had to face a hard reality. His opponent was a lot taller and could perfectly manage the distance. That problem weighed on Ellis, and he couldn't resolve it for more than half a fight, while massive Burton was peppering his opponent's nose, not forgetting to tie him up in the clinch. After all, he is Tyson Fury's cousin. Finally, before the 7th round, Zorro got proper advice from his corner and went for the victory.
You've got to hit the top. Oh, what a great shot! Great shot from Zorro. He's got him going. Left hand as well. And Burton desperately trying to hold on.
At first, he managed to stun Hosea and then threw a hellish right overhand.
And Zorro's looking to end it here in the 7th. And a tremendous right hand.
The coach's plan came to reality and gave the guy a sensational win. Number 5. Alexis Rocha versus George Ashe. While Crawford and Spence had a war for the right to hold the belts of all major organizations, other boxers in the welterweight division had to stay on the sidelines and settle for less. Among the unlucky ones was a young talent, Alexis Rocha. In the middle of 2022, Lex won the WBO NABO belt and was defending it up until this day. One of the defenses took place in January against George Ashe.
Start onslaught from Rocha. Oh my goodness!
Rocha was very straightforward and aggressive, but that was more than enough to land his best shots and stay safe for almost the entire time. The opponent didn't know how to approach such a persistent southpaw and simply retreated in despair, giving Alexis even more space. The prospect fully capitalized on that, and in the third round scored a wild knockdown with a right hook.
That a stoppage could be imminent because, again, oh my goodness, what a right hook!
Willing to develop his success, Rocha found the right moment and threw the same shot in the 7th, and that's a stiff KO.
Stop onslaught from Rocha. Oh my goodness!
Number 4. Eduardo Nunes versus Martin Sika. Sugar nickname is one of the most famous in the world of boxing, and a number of legends had it in different eras. In our time, this peculiar title went to the talented Shakur Stevenson, while Mexico produced its own Sugar called Eduardo Nunes. An extremely powerful puncher from the super featherweight division hasn't lost since 2018, continuing to terrorize his opponents. In the beginning of the year, undefeated Martin Sika was thrown under his bus. Nunes didn't need much time to download the style and movement of his opponent, and as soon as he did, Sika's fate was sealed. Somewhere at the end of the first round, the Mexican Sugar started to land his right shots, and they were getting heavier by the minute. Martin tried his best to resist, but lost focus and put his left hand down for a split second.
You can really hear the punch.
Right at that moment, his chin got blasted by a sharp hook that sent the guy down. One punch knockout. Number 3. Dennis Irino versus Jonathan Gahana. Sure, we really love the brawls between huge heavyweights, but we have to admit that the most dynamic and spectacular exchanges are put on by the guys from the lighter weight classes. It's been clear for a long time that the Filipinos and Thais are the best at that, and when it comes to the derby between these two nationalities, anything can happen. That's why we have to watch the battle between Dennis Irino and Jonathan Gahana. The first straight shot of Irino landed on Gahana after 5 seconds into the fight, and that kept on happening till the very end. No matter how hard Jonathan tried to get in the range and land a punch, his opponent was always one step ahead and punched him with a rear hand. Even an attempt to put on a chaotic exchange from Gahana only led to Dennis knocking him down. By the third round, Jonathan's patience ran out and he decided to go forward till either of them scored a knockout. As soon as he took the first incautious step and threw a punch, Irino shut him down with a precise straight. Gahana's hand finished the punch by inertia and the boxer went down unconscious. Number 2. Jordan White versus Erickson Garcia. There is quite an interesting paradox. The more you anticipate a certain event, the more likely it will disappoint. Boxing is not an exception, and it's often the case that incredible fights that happen to be dry and boring, while the scrap of some guys from the prelims is shockingly spectacular. As you can guess, the next fight between Jordan White and Erickson Garcia for the NABO Super Featherweight title goes in the second category.
Should apply more pressure.
And just like that, a sharp left hand!
The beginning of the fight was very peaceful. I would even say anti-dynamic. It usually doesn't promise anything good, but in our case, it was just the calm before the storm. The guys had wide mirrored stances and waited for their opponent to act. Garcia was casually throwing light shots with the left hand and measured the distance and then rushed at his opponent with a left hook.
Short dog should apply more pressure.
And just like that, a sharp left hand!
Wow.
It would have been perfect if it wasn't for Jordan's phantom check hook. The second White's gloves touched Erickson's chin, he was already limp and going down on the ground. One of the best counter punches of the year. Number 1. Khalil Co versus James Qua. All of us know that all boxers pad their record with tomato cans at the beginning of their careers, and we're used to that, but today we have a rare opportunity to see that firsthand. Sure, Khalil Co is far from being a top boxer, but his record of 7-0 is somewhat credible compared to his 6-3 opponent in James Qua, who will give him another flashy and most importantly, premature victory. Co could have killed this guy with his confidence alone, but he had to use his fists. Khalil was going after James and pressuring him for the entire first round, and when he went for an attack, he unloaded his right straight and scored a knockdown.
Co should be careful.
Oh, he cracks him with the right hand. Wheater goes down.
After an unpleasant experience on the canvas, James became more cautious, which helped him to survive the second round. But in the third, he went down again from a counter shot.
Nice.
Right hand counter.
Not willing to take his time any longer, the American blasted his opponent's head with a wild uppercut.
When you got a guy who's off balance.
Oh, but that could close the show.
Of course, it's a knockout. But here's what I don't get. How did James' head stay on his shoulders? And that's it. Did you like the video? Then hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of interesting stuff to come. Which knockout of 2023 do you think is the best and why? Leave your opinion in the comments below.